right.
You are listening to the Sabre Coach Kate podcast, where I highlight the great thinkers, athletes, and coaches in the dynamic sport of Olympic fencing.
Guard. We're on it.
Thank you for joining me for episode 3 of the Sabre Coach Kate podcast. In this interview, you'll hear about the experiences of Olympian Iris Zimmerman Nowack and her exciting evolution from cute 4-year-old in patent leather shoes to fencing Olympian to club owner and coach. I originally interviewed Iris a month ago in light of her disappointment about losing the opportunity to fence the women's foil team event at her Olympics because of the introduction of women's saber. I followed up with her yesterday to get her perspective about last week's announcement that all fencing team events will take place in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Stay tuned at the end of the interview for those comments. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Sabre Coach Kate podcast. I have with me today Iris Zimmerman. Iris is a pretty famous foil fencer and is distinguishing herself as the co-club owner of the Rochester Fencing Club. And Iris, thank you so much for joining me today and letting me pick your brain about you as a fencer and as a coach.
Oh, I'm happy to do the interview.
Okay, so first of all, how did you even become a fencer?
I started when I was about 6 years old. I actually knew about fencing since I was 2. My sister was 8 at the time when she started, and we're 6 years apart. So I would just kind of toddle along, literally, and watch her fence. And as soon as I was able to fence, I did. And my coach, Bucky Leach, he made me a little foil, and I used to hit this like small target at the club, even when I was like 3 and 4. Oh. So, I grew up around fencing.
You must have been so cute.
I was something else because I'd wear patent leather shoes and have a dress, and I was like this chunky girl, and like not chunky but solid, I guess is the word, and pretty thick and solid already. And it was just kind of funny to like little foil and patent leather shoes.
Well, and did you have any choice about the weapon that you ended up fencing, or was it only foil at the time?
Well, yeah, I think that's unfortunate because at the time I started in 1987, women weren't fencing the other two weapons in the Olympic Games. So I think I would have made a pretty good saber fencer. And a lot of the saber fencers said that I fence foil like a saber fencer, pretty aggressive, different kind of timing, using a lot of active defense. So, I would have loved the opportunity. And I think when I get my hip replacement, I definitely want to pursue saber a little bit more. But that was all we had. We had foil. Bucky was a foil coach, and we didn't have anything else. And my sister fenced foil. So there really wasn't a choice.
Yeah. Well, what was it like to have a sibling that competed in the same sport as you?
Well, it's a plus and minus, right? For the youngest sibling, it's always great because that person pioneers their way through problems and, has resolutions that you don't ever have to think about, and she was already breaking records. And the year that I won world championships in 95, she actually was a junior World Cup champion. So, I think it helps to motivate and push the younger sibling. I think at some points it becomes difficult because your only sort of North Star becomes your sibling in some ways, especially if they're in the same weapon. And that for us was very hard because in 2004, if I had beaten her at a tournament in Shanghai, I would have had enough points to make the 2004 team. But, I could have done better at other tournaments as well. But, you remember that sticks in your mind. It doesn't, not something you bring up at Thanksgiving, but,
Yeah.
Still annoying.
I was wondering about that, if that ever comes up at holidays, but apparently not. Apparently you managed to keep it separate.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think we've done a good job of that. We own a business together, and I think we're very close. And I think you'll find that with Aaron and Keith Smart and the Jacobsons and the other sibling pairs, the Hurleys. You'll find that there is some competitive push with each other, but at the end of the day, they're going to come home and support each other.
That's really great to hear. Tell me about your early life as a fencer. You have some considerable achievements that we'll talk about starting at age 14, but what led you up to that point?
Well, I think I think what's important, and from what I remember, is that I really enjoyed the experience. And I don't really remember my parents having to shove me in the car and bring me to the fencing club. So I always tell parents of kids that are starting to fence and say, you'll know whether or not this is the right sport for them, because they're not going to complain when you put them in. And there are going to be days where the kid doesn't want to come, but for me it was always really fun, and I wanted to be with the group, and I wanted to keep getting better. And so for me it clicked. My first tournament, and I think that really helped too, is having a little bit of success. And at the time there weren't these Y10 SYCs. There was like across the street from us, there was a high school, and Bucky ran a tournament with like 5 kids across the street, so and we're a wide 10, and I won that tournament. And so I think we would travel these small tournaments and travel to Canada. And for me, that was exciting. We got to go in the car and we got to travel somewhere. And, it was very exciting. And I did, before I won the Cadet World Championships, I actually won. I traveled overseas to one other tournament. So here I am, like 13 years old, going overseas. And that's where it helped to have Felicia too, because she was with me. And my parents wouldn't have sent me, to Europe if I didn't have my sister with me. And so I think that made it a fun experience too. So I was doing something really novel and different from the other kids in school. And I wasn't, I really am not that coordinated and athletic. I had to learn how to be coordinated and athletic, as most fencers have to do.
Yes. Yeah. Fencing does seem to attract the, shall we say, little less athletically inclined set of people.
Well, the more athletically inclined groups, I find, take soccer right away, and they take to it and they're successful. And the kids who have to work a little harder and grind a little bit more take to fencing, because they understand, like, and so I have to work harder at it. And so I never really thought it was work. I went to the club and I had a really good time. So for me that was really important. And Bucky was he is and was a tough coach, and I think he was very motivating in that way.
Well, you keep mentioning how fun it was. You don't always have that experience when you're a kid, when you're in sports, where you're having a good time. What was it about your club in particular that helped it be so enjoyable?
We were a small club, and the upper group and the lower groups kind of all fence with each other. We played a lot of games, and there was constant activity. We would move from one activity to another. And for me, who's a little bit ADD, I think, not diagnosed, but I think like activity to another, working on another thing, one other thing, it was fun for me. And I'm the kind of personality where I really liked learning a skill and seeing it come together, and then seeing it come together when I fenced someone. And I don't know. I mean, I just enjoyed it. I don't remember never liking fencing. I just always remember loving it.
Well, actually, I read somewhere, and I'm not sure if this is true, but that your dad made you practice the piano before you went to fencing, and that was the only way that he got you to practice because he knew you really wanted to fence. Is that true?
Yeah, so they would use it like I'd use, karate for my daughter. If you don't do X, then I'm not going to take you to karate. You have that to hold over them. And my father for sure, and my mother for sure used it. Like my mother was a tiger mom, so she was like, we did piano, and we did Saturday morning Chinese school when all I wanted to do was watch cartoons, and I had to do extra math, and she would hold it over my head. If you sit there at the piano, for an hour and practice, then I will let you go to fencing practice. And then she would tell Bucky and say, I won't give you a lesson. And if I hear from your mom that she's not happy because she's not bringing you to practice because you're not practicing your piano, then I'm going to be unhappy. And I was like, oh man, I'm not going to make Bucky unhappy. So I better
I love it.
go and make sure that happens.
I love it when coaches and parents work in tandem against the fencer. It's beautiful.
Yeah, you know what? I see that now with karate, how awesome it is, because my daughter just started and they have like this blue stripe you can get if you do chores at home. And immediately we came home, she's like, I'm going to do the dishes. And, a 4-year-old can't really do the dishes, wash the dishes, but she tried. She's like, can I get a blue stripe now? So I'm like, oh, I got to use this in the fencing club.
Oh, I love it. Oh man, that's great. Now, you do have a lot of firsts. You were the first American fencer to win gold at a cadet world championship, and that was in '95. You were the first American woman to win a medal at an international senior level competition, and that, I believe, was in 1999. And what is it about you that helped you achieve that? What particular qualities do you have?
Oh, yeah. So there's always that quality question, right? So when people break records, they never really think about breaking the record unless you're, a marathon runner and you're trying to break that, like someone just did a 2-hour mark. And, you just train and you try to do your best. And I think for us, there was this vast sort of Wild West for us in U.S. fencing, and hacked down the trees a little bit. And then it was my turn. And I didn't really think about it. I just thought, how good could I be? And I never questioned that I could be, I couldn't do it. I just never questioned that. There was always like, I can do this. And it was never a thought. Like, I just didn't have the same type of self-doubt that most people have. I guess maybe I'm remembering it in retrospect, and I'm sure I was very nervous, but I was only nervous for the competition itself. I didn't think like, oh, if I go here and I win, then I'll be the first blah, blah, blah to win. I'm 14 years old. Before I fenced, and this is a story that Bucky loves and that my sister loves, is that before I fenced for the gold medal at the championships at 14, Felicia's like, okay, Iris, you're about to fence the gold medal bout. What are you thinking right now? And I was like, do you think that French kid on the French, you think he'll talk to me later after I'm done fencing? And she was like, that's not really what you should be thinking about. And I'm like, oh, so like for me, I was 14 years old and I was just 14. And so all I was doing is just doing my job. And I think it's hard for me to say what the traits are. And I think for me, I work my tail off. I work really, and I just never want to do what everyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
Saying no one else does it. I do something. And now when I'm more cognizant of what women can and can't do, or, what, of the boundaries, when I'm more cognizant of the boundaries than I was when I was younger, I think I do my best to try to trample on them. Just because I think that's just my personality.
Yeah. Well, maybe the reason you did so well is because you weren't thinking that you were about to be on the gold medal strip. It was, let's see how I can get this guy to talk to me later.
Yeah, I know. It's such a terrible story. I'm never telling my children that. But, for me, is that I work. I'm a worker bee. And you can ask anyone. You can ask Bucky. You can ask people who know me here. I work. So all I do is put my head down. And when the competition's over, I pick my head up. And that's kind of how it goes for me. Every competition was, I go until I stop. I go until I stop. Mm-hmm. So I'm just a hard worker in that way. And I think one of the things that also helps, and that I see in retrospect, is how resilient I am. And I owe a lot of that to my mother. And my mother doesn't suffer a lot of tears. Mm-hmm. And you have to pick yourself up and continue forward. And so I think those traits are really important. I think the medals in the end belong to the people that, so much that like I have to get this goal, but more that they just keep picking themselves up and keep going forward without the thought of like, I have to have this end goal.
Mm-hmm. It's more about the whole process that they enjoy rather than the end result.
Yeah, and you hear that all the time of people who are very successful, is that they live very much in the process. And learning how to rather than learning how to rather than reaching that end result as the end goal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, quick question about the 1999 World Championships. Because I'm a saber fencer and coach, I really have to know this. Did you know that was the first time that women were allowed to compete internationally in saber? It was at that particular event.
I do have to admit on tape that I was not as gracious when women's saber first came out. There was Mrs. Mom, and there were a couple of other people, Stacy Johnson, and they had made headway in trying to get this saber into the Olympic Games because women should be allowed to do that. But what happened was the fight for us, foil got taken out of the Olympic Games as a team event.
Oh,
and if it was a team event, I would have gone in 2004. So I do understand in retrospect the need.
Mm-hmm.
We were the best women's foilists. We were the best team for the United States at the time. Before Marielle won her gold medal, we were the best team at the time. And I felt like what they did was take all the work that we put into being the best team and pulled it out from underneath us. And at the time, as an athlete at 19 years old, that's all I know.
Right.
You know, as a woman at 36, looking back with Marielle's result and what has resulted from it, obviously the choice was correct. But whenever choices are made for that, unfortunately, in my opinion, it was made at a sacrifice of other women. And so for me, that was very difficult for me to swallow, you know, of like, okay, let's add women's saber, but then let's take out women's foil team. And I felt like I would have liked some fight. And I don't know the political process. I would have loved a fight, all of the weapons to receive all of the, you know, team events. And that's the problem with sports sometimes is as an athlete, you are at the mercy of the political process. But looking back, I'm happy. You know, I'm happy for what happened. I really enjoy watching Marielle win. Success has really helped us as a country as a team. But, you know, being an athlete at 19, having done your whole life and knowing that it would be a struggle to make the team event the next time, that's what I was looking at.
Right.
So, you know, as great as that was, it was hard for me in the moment. And I think there were many times, and I still don't speak to Stacy Johnson anymore.
Oh, well,
hard. I mean, that's
it happens.
I
Yeah.
want because it's not, but it is the reality of who I was at the moment, and who you are at 19 is not who you are at 36.
Right. Exactly. Wow. Well, you know, I had never thought about it from that perspective because, of course, I'm just happy that I get to do what I get to do. But I didn't think about how that impacted other women and other weapons. So thank you for that perspective.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay not to think about it. I didn't think about it either. You know, I didn't think about how wonderful it is to have saber because I have a lot of girls who fence saber here who wouldn't fence if they didn't have saber. I personally want to fence saber too, you know, so it's not about that. I think owning up to knowing important to be honest about what my thoughts were at the time of being an athlete, because that's the reality for every athlete when people make political decisions.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, you've mentioned the Olympics several times. You got to go to the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. Tell me a story from that Olympics. Not even necessarily fencing related, but just something memorable from your time there.
From the Olympic Games, I think the most memorable time for me was right before we boarded the bus ceremonies, because not all of the athletes stayed at the Olympic Village. Like Serena Williams wasn't at the Olympic Village, and there was Monica Seles, maybe, I think, was still made that team, and not all of them stayed at the Village. But before we went to the opening ceremonies, all the athletes, the U.S. athletes, came to the Village, and we boarded a bus together. So I got a chance to meet all of the athletes. And at the time, I'm thinking, oh, I'm just a fencer. And look, there's like a tennis player, and like that's Serena, and that's Venus. And at the time, there was a called He Got Game. And there's a Milwaukee Bucks player, Ray Allen, that I had a huge crush on from He Got Game, the movie. And I met him
Oh, wow.
The Olympic team and I met you. Oh my God. So, so he was like, and his answer was, oh, you're from Rochester. I live in Milwaukee. I was like, I know. And he's like, well, it's cold. And he's like, hurry up, take the picture. Like it was cold in Milwaukee and it's cold in Rochester. And I was like, yes, you're awesome. I'm so excited. So I think for me, it was really cool to meet all the athletes because even now, like I'm a huge fan of athletes. I'm a huge fan of Olympic athletes. And that's why I do the role that I currently do as the vice president of U.S. Olympic and Paralympic alumni. And I love the Olympics and I love meeting Olympians. And so for me, it was just such a joy to meet those Olympians before we boarded the bus to go to opening ceremonies. And I can't tell you how amazing it is to compete for the United States. The U.S. does it really well. Team is kind of a small team and we're not as good as at the time of the Italians, and so we didn't have all the support and we were this sort of makeshift team. The US Olympic team, you are sorry to say that but you are it. Like everybody looks to the United States Olympic team at the Summer Olympic Games. And it was so cool because I'm like, I'm a part of this amazing group of athletes and I'm unbelievable feeling.
Wow. Yeah, I can't even imagine. That's amazing to have that opportunity. Now, you came within 2 touches of a bronze medal at that Olympics. What was that like for you?
Well, after therapy,
yeah,
talk about it. It was hard because not only did we not win the medal, we also lost on a red card.
Oh, no.
So it's not like we even had and there was a whole thing too, because it's a whole big to do. There was a lot of thoughts in retrospect is that I think I probably should have gone third to last instead of second to last. And Felicia was the one beating up on the Germans, and I was not doing so well, but maybe they might have taken me out. Anne Marsh made a huge comeback, and while she was making a comeback for covering, and then she made one more touch, and she would have tied it up. They annulled the touch and then gave us a red card. But it wasn't even that the ref stood back and gave us all that. The ref stood back. The German coach came up to him. And this was before you had those corrals for the coaches. So the German coach actually came up to them. And since then, we're trying to figure out whether or not he was paid or something happened or he pushed the issue with the red card. It's like, what self-respecting referee does that to a country that knows their first medal ever, and you step back and let them lose on a red card? You don't even let them battle it out. You let them lose on a red card. Like, what ref would do that? And so I think, and it wasn't even that it was completely visible. And I'm not sure if I have to double check, but I'm not sure if the person, the hand assessor actually, raised their hand, but the referee had the power to make that decision, and they made the decision that they did. And for us, it was very hard. At 19 years old, for me, I was like, oh, I'm going to make another Olympic team. And I didn't, so I think for me, that was very hard. Felicia, it was very hard. It's like never finishing a good book. Like you had such a good book and then you lost the book.
Yeah.
2 pages of the book that would have concluded everything. Right. You lost the book, and and they burnt it since then. You can't ever get the book again.
Yeah.
So that's the way it feels. It feels like a cliffhanger that never got resolved. And I think for us, because of all of the firsts and all of the trailblazing that we did, I think for us it would have made a difference personally, but also like to other people, knowing that we were the first to do that bronze medal, because I think then people would have understood the impact goes on. Not many people understand the impact that the women's foil team had, that Anne Marsh did. I mean, she was the first to make a top 16 before we had Pan Am Games where you can get double points. Right. So, those kind of things. She was 7th in the world at some point, and she was going to medical school. So nobody really understands that impact of us and what we did anymore. I think if you win that bronze medal on that Olympic stage, I think it makes a difference to people. And in the end, you have to be okay with what performance that you put out. And it's hard. I mean, even now I'm like, God bless it.
Yeah, I know. I really hesitated to ask you that question because I'm sure, after all this time, it's got to be a sore wound.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's okay to be disappointed. I think people are so afraid of being disappointed. I mean, if you're afraid of being disappointed, then you're never gonna have the highs. You have to have both. It's just both. Yeah. When you compete, when you strive, when you're passionate about something, you have to have both.
And then the determination to keep trying, even if it doesn't go the way you want.
Yeah, and I tried.
Yeah.
So, yep. Lots of therapy. I'm okay now.
Mostly. All right. Well,
yeah.
Who are some notable people you have fenced over the years, and what were they like as competitors and or people?
Who are the people that I've fenced over the years that I like, or?
No. Who are people that you have fenced, and what were they like as competitors?
Okay. Who have you fenced over the years, and what were they like as competitors and as people? Like a couple people that you competed with that you don't. But I think the thing about fencing is that the nature of the sport actually, maybe because it's a combat sport and because it's more about you on the strip than it's more about you than it is about the other person sometimes. And so I think because of that, you become allies and comrades in battle, basically, knowing what it takes to be in that battle. So I think I admired Giovanna Trellini was a woman I looked up to. I actually got to fence her at the 2000 games. Bucky used her as a template for my own fencing. And so I always felt like she was a class act. No matter what happened, she got off the strip and thanked her opponents. She never said anything bad. She has supported her teammates. She coaches now. So for me, I think fencing lends itself to that, is that the closeness, that camaraderie, because you're in a battle situation. You're not, as much as people think like you have to hate the other person to hit them, it's actually not the case. The more you have emotion about the other person, the more you get worked up about the other person, the harder it is to fence them. And so the person just becomes a target and a weapon. And I think it's a battle against yourself. Like at the top level, everyone has their skills and game. It's close and match sometimes. And so I think what you do is that you come together knowing how much you put into it and knowing that we're on the battlefield together, even though we're fighting against each other.
That's an interesting perspective.
That's why I like fencing, and it's a team. For me, it was very much a team atmosphere, even when you are doing it individually. Because I never felt like I directed angst or being upset towards my opponent. Because I said this in a talk to kids once. I said, without your opponent being the best they can be, you're nobody. Right? Because you need your opponent to be who you are, right? So if you want to be good, you need the other person to be just as good. Otherwise, the fight, it's nothing. Well, that's the thing. You need your opponent to be good.
Yeah. Otherwise, that gold medal doesn't mean very much.
It doesn't. And also, if they didn't fence, you wouldn't be you. You wouldn't be you on the strip.
Just one more question about you as a fencer, and then I'd like to ask you a couple of coaching questions. But what were you like as a fencer? And would you like to coach yourself as you were back then?
Oh, man, that's not a good question because Felicia would be on the strip, and I would, in order to deal with the stress of being on the strip, I would turn around and yell at her. So, and you almost manifest that other person as the inner voice of doubt. And so when you turn around and it's either your coach or your parent and you turn around and you yell at them, it's because you're manifesting that stress onto them, because it's a lot and it's a load to put onto yourself. So Felicia and I used to just yell at her, and I could never yell at Bucky, but like I always asked her to be at my strip, and she would always be what she said, a punching bag. So I would not, although I'm not sure, I would know how to coach myself, but I was a fierce competitor. I mean, I was down. I always did my best, and Anne would always say, like, just because you're down 5 points on Iris, you can't sleep on that. Like, Iris will come back. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was a huge part of my game too, was that I would always come back. It's not over till it's over. And so, and I was a fierce competitor, and I was pretty tough mentally, and I honed those skills as much as I could. And, I wasn't, I talked to people about it, and I was very focused. So I think sometimes when you're very focused and you're very determined, people take it as like, oh, she's very standoffish and she's kind of mean and intimidating. But I think I was just very focused on what I wanted to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
So I think that is hard. But I did hear from the Armor, which made me feel good, is that they said, you did your best and always respected people and was always a good teammate. And so I think I hear from people, people who are on the periphery that you're not really friends with, that watch you, they're the ones that really saw you. And he said, you were a good teammate. You were always very supportive. So that for me felt really good, because I always tried to be that person. I was a competitor. I wanted to win. So I wasn't always nice all the time. I remember like someone was telling me that, when I first fenced Lee Kiefer, I was like, check her LeMay, it's too short, and like people were like, oh, she's so mean. And I was like, no, I want it to be fair. And so I think some people have that perception of very intimidating and mean, but I think I was just trying to just focus in on what I was doing.
Tell me why you decided to become a coach.
Oh, after the Olympic Games in 2008, there was I had to help the club. There weren't a lot of coaches. And this sort of leads into one of your questions about why we own the club. Like I called Felicia up after I didn't make the team. And, I had a really rough go of making the team in 2008, like really bad. And, I was in a bad place. And so, I was just coaching because I felt a station and a place to have a healing process so I could move forward. And while I was there, I realized that if Felicia and I didn't buy the club, that the club would close.
Okay.
She was actually in Dubai at the time, and she fronted the money for the club, and I helped to run terrible job in the very beginning, and we were hemorrhaging money, and we had a lot of coaches, and it wasn't my prettiest time in my life, but it worked itself through, and I've learned a lot since then. But I think catalyst, and Felicia didn't even blink. She was like, yes, we got to own the club. For me, the reason why I asked Felicia to own the club was, this was my safe place. I was I was like a square peg in a round hole everywhere else in my world. And I think in the fencing club I walked in, and everyone else was the square peg. So I felt very safe here, and I felt like it was a much needed place for people to have that. And my goal was actually to own the fencing club for a little while and then give it to someone else. I didn't know it would become my life. But because it's, as you know, as a coach, it's very fulfilling. I mean, you get to see the process in someone else. You get to give them information that you've gotten over the years. And it's really very cool to see the kids grow as people and as fencers. And that for me is a really fun process. And working for myself, I could never sit at a desk and pretend that I liked it. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to law school and then go to run for Congress. And that was my goal and mission when I went to Stanford. I was like, forget this fencing stuff. I'm going to be a congresswoman. I'm going to change the world. And I realized that the way to change the world is through education and offering something like this to kids that need it. and to adults that need it. So for Felicia, her motivation was to help me, because she knew that it would be hard for me just to give up fencing, and fencing was such a huge part of my life. So her forethought was like, maybe this is a place for Iris to heal, but also to grow as well. And she also didn't see me sitting behind a desk and grinding away. It's just not who I am.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like the two of you know each other super well and really care a lot about each other.
Yes, but it's also very annoying when you know someone really well, because you don't even say it. Like, what are you giving me that face for? Like you don't even have to say it. Like a scrunchy nose means 1,000 things, and you know what it means, and it's so annoying. So.
And she's probably right.
Yeah, and I hate that.
Yeah, I know.
I hate that.
What is your coaching philosophy? You've touched on, wanting kids to be able to learn new things. You enjoy that, but what's your underlying philosophy as a coach?
I think you need to meet every kid at their need. I think that gone are the days where you institute, you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way. Parry 4 is only taught this way, and this is fencing. I think there's merit to that, but I also think that there's a lot of merit to teaching to the student and making sure that you meet them at their need. I think kids more and more need mentors, and they need positive feedback. And they're constantly being tested. I think kids are constantly stressed out. I think they need a place to learn and to feel safe. That's another thing is they need a safe place to learn how to fail and be resilient. So if at the very end of the day, I can offer them support and, teach them about being a more resilient human being. And, all that other stuff comes with it too. In fencing, there's a lot of respect, but, that comes with time. And once you learn the skill and more of it, those things come with time. But I think my overarching philosophy is making sure that understanding that fencing is a tool. It's not like a sport that I have to place on top of a kid. It's a tool to learn about themselves, and it's a tool for more.
Wow, I really like that. That's really making me stop and think. Because, of course, as I'm asking you these things, I'm like, what's my coaching philosophy? And I'm like, oh, man, that was such a good answer.
I think everyone in fencing, for the most part, when I see, this is off the record, maybe, I don't know, but when I see you and Dave working, you do that too. I think in our see fencing as a monetary thing, or see it as like, I have to be, the only way I'm going to be successful is making these champions. But although competing, right? So the reason why I was so good is because I enjoyed the process. And so as a coach, you have the process and you are the process. So I think you have to give the kids the understanding that they have to be in the process and they're always learning. And I see that in you and Dave, and doing that at your own club, because, you're not like every day posting, this kid is doing awesome and they're winning and here's this medal. And, so it's that, that.
Yeah, it is about helping them become better people, just in general, not just better athletes. Absolutely.
Right.
What do you like least about coaching? I've heard all the good things that you enjoy about it, but is there anything that you don't like about it?
I think the hard part for me is when a kid is disrespectful and it's not backed up saying something to the kid. And that wasn't even it. It was just a daily life thing, like being made fun of for being Asian and a parent not saying anything about it. I think that the only downfall, but really I don't see very much of it. Like, I really enjoy the educational process. Some kids will learn, some kids won't. You'll make sure that kids are, some kids will enjoy the sport, some kids won't. And I don't take offense at that. And I don't say, oh, it's not because I didn't do my best. It's because the kid just didn't want to do the sport. So I have no problem with that. I have a problem if a kid is rude. And I don't enjoy that part of being a coach, because that rudeness has nothing to do with me. It just has to do with the fact that he or she is being rude. There's not a ton of kids like that. I teach enough and you go out into enough rec centers, there are kids who are being forced into a class. And so I guess that's what I have to say to parents in general is don't force your kid to do something if they don't want to do it, because it makes it miserable for them and for the coach that's trying their best.
Yeah.
It does, because you can't motivate someone who doesn't want to be there.
No, exactly. Yeah. How many times have we seen that too over the years? You can't, well, as they say, you can lead a horse to water, but can't make him, I guess, hit people with a saber.
Yeah, no, yeah. You can't force kids to be what they don't want to be. And that for me is hard, but there really isn't, but that's not really, I don't think there's anything I don't like about coaching. I think it's a constant process. And what I enjoy most is what I've taken is the thought process that I take on the fencing strip when I fence with someone and have to learn figure out the problem and the tactics. What happens now is that I look at a student and I think, okay, and how can I fix that? So then rather than fencing with someone, I'm teaching them, but with that same mentality as I approached fencing.
Except as using their mistakes against them, now you're seeing their mistakes and then seeing how you can make them stronger.
Correct.
Okay, well, I've got this last section of questions that I like to close all of my podcast interviews with. They are the famous questions from James Lipton, who was the guy who did Inside the Actors Studio, and Marcel Proust. And so I've taken my favorites from both of their lists, and I'm going to ask you a couple of them.
Okay.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? My favorite word is resilience.
What is your least favorite word?
Lazy.
What sound or noise do you love?
My children's voices.
What sound or noise do you hate?
My daughter's whining.
So you love it and then you don't.
It's like motherhood. You love it and hate it. Being a coach, you love it and hate it.
Yeah. Well, it's always the flip side,
Right.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Being a doctor.
What is it about being a doctor that appeals to you?
I think you can do a whole lot to raise someone's spirits and make them live better if you're a good doctor.
And what profession would you not like to do?
An accountant. Holy cow.
Oh, math all day.
No thanks.
Where would you like to live?
Near water. So probably Colorado, California.
And what do you value most in your friends?
Loyalty.
Who is your hero?
My mother.
And what is your motto?
I did this for the fencing club, but I don't think it's correct English, but challenge your impossible.
Okay, and one last question. This is the geeky part of me. What is it like to have a Wikipedia article about you out there for everybody to see?
I think it's both. I think it's very cool. But at the same time, sometimes it's pressure to live up to that, thinking I have to be this person to have a Wikipedia page, when really in actual fact, a person who worked really hard and got where she got and looked up at the end of the day and had a medal. And to have a Wikipedia page, then I do care a lot what people think. So, people make assumptions about things, how the person should be. And so I think I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to figure out who I really am instead of what I think people think I should be. Do you want it?
That's really deep. Thank you very much. All right. Well, this is the end of our time together today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to chat with me a little bit.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I appreciate you reaching out. And if there's anything I can ever do in the future for you, or let me know. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you at Summer Nationals. Good morning, Iris.
Good morning.
Thank you again for agreeing to chat with me just a little bit. Last week, they revealed that all of the teams were now going to be able to earn medals at the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. And in light of what happened to your women's foil team when you were at the Olympics and how you weren't able to earn a medal that year because women's saber took that medal possibility away, I wanted to give you the chance to comment on how you feel about that.
Well, I think the first reaction for me is just being happy for U.S. fencing, that we have more opportunities to show our strength. Right now, we have women that are top in the world, and including it's so early. I'm blanking on some things, but Lee Kiefer, Nicole Ross, they're top in the world right now. So they get to fence and compete together as a team. And I think what it does is it continues to strengthen the weapon. So what happens usually when team events are taken out is people who are on the periphery of making a team drop out. So instead of dropping out, they keep running for a team. There's more possibility. So I think it helps to grow the depth of the sport, and you have less lag time in rebuilding each weapon, if you know what I mean. So I think it really is great for planning purposes. It's great for future fencers. I think the difficult part for me as an athlete is that it was 13 years too late for us.
Right.
A lot of times, for me, and what I end up being is sort of the human face to a consequence that needed to happen. You need to make progress happen. Put women's saber into the really important, but as a consequence, things are sacrificed. And women's foil, at a time we were on top, U.S. women's foil was sacrificed. And I think for me, I posted about it. It's very difficult, but you can't go backwards. You can only go forward. And not to say that it's not difficult, but at this point, the focus needs to be on the next generation of fencers.
That's really inspirational that you could put the past behind you like that and look toward the future.
Yeah, so you do enough therapy, and no, I'm just kidding. But it's been a long time. I'm not a fencer anymore. I'm a fencer always, but I'm a coach now, and my focus is on the children at the fencing club and not on myself anymore. So I think it takes that edge off, because I can see in my fencers the opportunity for them in the future, and I want that for them. So, and it's out there, and there's never a question of, will you be in a team event when you're ready, or is there a team event when you're ready? Now there's always a team event to look forward to, so that people aren't sacrificing their careers because there isn't a team event. So that's a very positive thing, and I'm hopeful for U.S. fencing.
That's really great. Well, thanks a lot for the comment.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Once again, I'd like to thank Tony Escueda for his creation of the music for this podcast. Tony has also begun helping me edit all of the interviews and removing a few of the awkward pauses. So you all have him to thank for the better quality of this particular interview. I'd also like to thank my sponsor, Cutting Edge Fencing, for helping me purchase some swag that I will be handing out at Summer Nationals, patches for everyone that I interview, pins for people that come up and ask me for one, and I'm also going to do a special edition recording at Summer Nationals, and if you are a part of that recording, I will give you a Sabre Coach Kate podcast sticker. Thank you to all of you out there who listen to this podcast. I really appreciate you more than you realize. This was a project that I started on a whim just to see if I could do it, and I have been thrilled at the response that I've been getting from some of you about the interviews and also for the ideas for potential future interviews. I'd like to invite you to visit my blog at sabercoachkate.wordpress.com, where you can find articles that will help your beginners, but also your more experienced fencers. Yes, I am a saber coach, but a lot of the articles are applicable to foil and epee as well. Sabercat for his constant companionship and purring during the recording and editing of this episode.
you.